Let's just have a recap of what we know through open source intelligence and satellite imagery about the Russian buildup on the Ukrainian border that Deborah was talking about. So in terms of the Russian border itself, there are a number of units that have moved much closer to it and are now starting to surround it. Of course, there's a number in Crimea as well, which Russia annexed back in 2014, you remember. There is a unit as well, a unit or two in Moldova. And then, well, those numbers are around 100,000. Then we have the exercises that are ongoing in Belarus. And you can quite clearly see there that kind of picture of encirclement, if you like, around Ukraine. The other thing that I would point out is the Black Sea Fleet down here, based in Sebastopol in Crimea, used to be pretty decrepit about 20 years ago. But they've undergone 2 decades of massive investment. They were pretty crucial, actually, when Crimea was annexed, in stopping the Ukrainian warships from getting back to their base. And it could be, if there was an invasion, that they could play some sort of role, either a long-range missile-type role, or perhaps, and you've got the Ukrainian port of Odessa around there, one of the key ports, key maritime ports for Ukrainian imports and exports. Perhaps they could play a role around that. I just want to highlight on a satellite image one piece of Russian equipment, and this is the S-400. NATO call it the Growler. It's an air defense system that most analysts think is pretty much the best in the world. And so this gives Russia coverage of the airspace, wherever they place it, with around a 400-kilometre radius, and gives them a defensive system against any foreign or enemy aircraft. So if we go back out to the larger map, I can show you where they place it. That is a satellite image that we just showed you of that system based around there in the sort of southern centre of Belarus. We believe there's also a similar system just over the border from Kharkiv in Russia here, and one down in Crimea. So assuming that fact is correct, what it means is that, and this is rough, but if you think of a 400-kilometre radius around all of these, it gives Russia control, or at least awareness, of a large part of airspace over Ukraine. So when people talk about things like patrolling the skies and getting NATO to have a no-fly zone, that makes it far harder to carry something like that out. And one final thing that I'm going to put on here are the positions of NATO forces around the region. So you can see that it's not necessarily Russia having it its own way. Of course, it's only right to put in Ukrainian forces as well, around 200,000 Ukrainian regular forces, large, but minuscule when you compare it to the size of the Russian forces. And as a final point, despite the fact that you've got this massive buildup of the Russians all around here, and that's, as I said at the beginning, the sort of the open source satellite intelligence, if you like, or videos that are appearing on social media, the forces what we know about, of course. If the first shots are going to be fired in this potential conflict, it might not come from traditional hardware at all. It could be what we now know as hybrid warfare. So cyber attacks, for example, against critical infrastructure in Ukraine. Perhaps the little green men that we remember back in 2014 in Crimea. It might be that the Russians don't use traditional military means if they decide to exacerbate a conflict with Ukraine.